There might be Iran, or whatever the issue areas were. And it used to be that we would say that we were doing well or poorly in the relationship by sort of scoring all of these individual issue areas and tallying them up. Depending on what we're doing better, we're doing worse. We've moved beyond that. The new framework, the way that both leaders in both countries talk about the relationship, and you saw this when Xi Jinping and President Obama spoke at the UN General Assembly, early last week. We speak about world order. We look at the relationship in terms of which country is more successful in shaping regional orders and shaping world orders. It's not just bilateral. It's a global game. And this world order framework, I think, is in many ways a better framework because it makes the relationship multilateral. If you just look at the headlines week to week on the U.S. and China, a lot of these journalists write as if the United States and China are the only two countries in the world. When you look at it bilaterally, it's really hard to avoid the conclusion that we're headed for some serious multilateralism that saves us from ourselves and each other. So the world order framework is better, but it can also be abused. We heard people refer to this. President Obama, early this year, because he wanted to get this Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, started a new line, basically to convince Democrats to support
the city. I don't think they're going to get it.
And now the Trans-Pacific Partnership before he reformed the economics. Anyway, Obama kept saying, China wants to set the rules for the 21st century. We can't allow that. We have to set the rules for the 21st century. Now, this, I think, is convincing some Congress people. I also think it's a terrible line. Terrible line to take. Chinese ambassador to the U.S., Cui Tiankai, jumped on it immediately. He said, it doesn't matter who makes the rules. What matters is good rules and everybody can sign on. The president kept using this line that China can't make the rules. Of course, the implication of that is that China isn't qualified to make the rules. China can't contribute to world order in a positive way. And we saw just today with the negotiations that are being concluded, the Wall Street Journal headline, Trans-Pacific Deal, a setback for China. So we're now talking about making rules, world order, but we're still talking about it in the old way, that it's always a win-lose game. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Is it true that China is isolated or ineffectual within the world order arena? In some ways it is. China has to date offered very few proposals for new rules. China will now say, we have been a beneficiary of the existing world order. The Bretton Woods agreements that were built after World War II, the American providing of security in the Western Pacific. China says, we are a beneficiary of that. We don't want to overthrow the world order, but we have something to offer, and we want to improve it and refine it, which I think is well and good and needs to be very open about. But as a point of fact, China has offered very few concrete proposals. Instead, over the past few years, it's mostly been asserting big country prerogatives about what China wants as a dogwall or a big country. China also, in terms of shaping world order influence, to date, and I emphasize to date, China changes very, very fast. We lose track of this part of the story. China is changing. Also, I've been watching American predictions about China for the past 30 years. We're always wrong. We've always been wrong. China has always changed and adapted and grown far faster than anybody thought. So no predictions. But it is still true that to date, China has very little of what is called soft power or attractive power, which means the ability to convince rather than to coerce. The ability to bring partners into your camp because they are attracted by aspects of your culture, your values, what have you. China has very little of this to date. And China, as we know in the U.S., is often presented in the daily newspapers to us as a rule breaker. We hear a lot about this. China is ignoring international norms, building islands in the South China Sea. China is manipulating its currency. China is using cyber to steal trade secrets, to conduct espionage. You hear a lot of this. China is still stealing American intellectual property. All of these things are true to some degree. But in fact, and I think this is maybe one of the things to take away from tonight, despite all those headlines, if we look at all of the organizations and the treaties that China is signatory to, the international organizations that China contributes to, number one provider of peacekeepers for international projects around the world. For the most part, China participates in and largely upholds the world order. Largely upholds. We tend to hear about the exceptions. We also, when we hear this world order rhetoric, including from our own leaders, but from other leaders as well, we have to remember that nobody knows what this phrase world order means. It's extremely shaky. At times it's even dubious. There's no one set of laws that everybody recognizes as always applying. What we call the world order is imperfect. There are huge gaps, huge areas of human international activity that are not covered. It is very rapidly evolving, and the world order is also contested. So it's not a clear and complete thing, something sacrosanct and shining that China's throwing mud at. That's the wrong way to think of it. We often speak of it that way. The world order consists of international laws, norms, and practices. Those aren't the same thing. International organizations, and those change all the time. And provision of international goods, things like emergency response and response to disease, like we tell you, China contributed to fighting Ebola in Africa. So China overall is actually a pretty good player. We tend to hear about the exceptions to that. China also has some legitimate complaints about the way that the current world order is run. There was an approval to restructure the IMF, the voting shares in the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, so that the voting shares would more closely reflect the financial contributions that you made to the IMF. This seems fair, right? I mean, why would you object? Congress object. The IMF proposed it, the administration approved it, it's been sitting in Congress untouched, so that China is still underrepresented. Now, I don't want to portray China as always the victim. China plays power games with rules too. China fights very hard against having Japan and India included as permanent members of the UN Security Council. Why? It's too bad about it, that's why. We don't want them. They don't want a strong Japanese ones or strong Indian ones. So China plays this way too. So again, remember that when you hear this world order, it's not that it's complete and that China's offending against it and we're all upholding it. It's far more contested and dynamic than that. Also, China's capacity to contribute to the world order and to human welfare worldwide is increasing. China has the foreign exchange reserves, and although China has many poor people, and many people in China object to China spreading money around the rest of the world. In fact, China is doing more and more of that. China has recently founded the Infrastructure Investment Bank, the AIIB, and it is contributing tens of billions of dollars to that organization, and it's also contributing to the New Development Bank, what used to be called the BRICS Bank, and through a whole host of infrastructure projects through what it calls the One Belt, One Road initiative. So Xi Jinping is committing on the order of about $100 billion or more to all of these different international lending and development vehicles. Now, they have no record yet. They've been announced. They haven't made a single loan yet. So we don't know where this is headed. But clearly, China has the capacity and the will to put this out there. So China looks like it has the capacity to make major difference, and it's unproven but great potential. One of the questions I think China faces, and we'll get to Russia in a minute, when it wants to play a bigger role in shaping world order, in building soft power, in being seen as a major nation. One of the questions that keeps coming up is, does China really have an alternate vision to offer? China speaks a lot about opposing American hegemony. This is the word they use for American arrogance that the world only sees. They call it a hegemon a good deal, and they tend to imply that America is forcing other countries to accept our values, our institutions, our culture, or whatever it may be. And now China wants to propose an alternative. But in various ways, China gets asked the question, okay, what is China's alternative to modernity, which has been colored, if not formed by America? And China doesn't really have an answer to that. China is very quick to say the rest of the world doesn't understand China. And then we say, okay, what is the world doing? China has a hard time. China is still shaping its international message, and so it has a hard time winning allies from inside. But again, with the caveat that China is changing. Now, Xi Jinping is beginning to come up with structures or ideas about how China might be a leader of institutions, visions, values, structures that are an alternative to or stand side by side with those of America and the West. So what is he reaching for? Xi is increasingly portraying China as the leader of the developing world. This is very important to him. He speaks a lot about about developing countries, and China is going to be the leader of the developing world. And this idea actually has a history that goes back to Mao Zedong, who also was very interested in the non-aligned movement, or what used to be called the Third World, and positioning China as a leader. Xi Jinping is trying to set himself up as the leader of the developing world. And it was very interesting when he was speaking at the UN last week. He made a big pitch for the leader, as leader of the developing world, for common values. What is for common values? So when he said this, everybody who follows Xi Jinping said, "What? What are you talking about?" Because Xi Jinping has been massively, very strongly opposed to universal values. He's been attacking universal values. In fact, universal values are listed in a government document as one of the 7 things that cannot be discussed in the media or in universities because it is harmful to China. He listed Western values as a new, non-traditional threat to the Chinese state that is going to be dealt with by the new National Security Council. Western values are listed together with terrorism and sedition as a non-traditional value. So universal values, he's strongly opposed. There's no such thing as universal values. China does not recognize universal values. And now he's calling the world to flock around common values. And even Chinese people on the internet are saying, Mr. Chairman, I have a question. What does he list as common values in his speech? Peace, development, fairness, justice, democracy, and freedom. These are the common values of humanity. But they're not the universal values. Those are not yet, those are bad for China. So you can see that he's trying, but having a little bit of difficulty in finding a way of talking to the rest of the world. But being a leader of the developing world is one of the things that Xi Jinping wants to do. The other thing that he's put forward is partnership with Russia. Partnership with Russia. Not an alliance. China has no allies. North Korea is sort of an ally, but China actually has a very deep commitment to a policy of non-alliance. It describes its words alliances as binding, that if you're allied with somebody, as we're allied with Japan, Philippines, Australia, as doorstep, Thailand, Korea, that your allies can drive you into situations that you can't control. So China has a bit of a go-and-loan policy, but has announced a partnership with Russia. And that partnership has been framed primarily in terms of opposition to the United States and the institutions that it leads. Now, this partnership with Russia, Washington has tended to sort of poo-poo it, for reasons I'll get to in a bit. I think we take it somewhat seriously. Fontaine was right. This has been the game. I mean, in a sense, it was the game and the great game even before the opening to China in 1972. These are the 2 great continental powers in Eurasia. And I think that we need to take their coming together, we need to look at it very seriously. Whether we should see it as a threat or not is something we can discuss. We need to note, for example, that China and Russia have certain stylistic and historical affinities that position them on another side of the line from the United States. Both are civilization states, the way that the United States is not. They're old, extremely proud, deeply mythologized, very strong sense of self and history. and deservedly so, since they've been through. Also, both places have a strong sense of grievance. Both China and Russia get a lot of fuel out of victimhood narratives. We are great civilizations, undoubtedly, which have been victimized, misunderstood, and insulted. The case in history is very different from Russia and the United States. There's a strong feeling of that in both nations. In China, they call the Baidian-Guo of 100 years of the century of humiliation. In Russia, there has always been, as you probably know, a sense of being somewhat second-class citizens and looked down on by Europe, which is both admired and reviled by Russians. And then in more recent times, of course, with the collapse of the Soviet Union, that adds to the sense of victimhood and misunderstanding in Russia. And this is something that brings them together, especially vis-a-vis the United States. Both countries, too, have a very strong sense of their uniqueness, what the Chinese call 中国特色, and the Russians call Ruski Mir, of their own exceptionalism. We talk a lot about American exceptions. In my experience, China, they have an even stronger, more deeply rooted exceptionalism of being a people set apart than we do. It's different. Its constituent parts are different than ours. But of course, it has a vastly longer history. And remember that China, for most of human history, by most standards, has in fact been the most successful civilization on Earth. This is a fact. Chinese are correct about it. Not debatable when you look at the whole sweep of history. So both China and Russia feel aggrieved, but they're also great believers in their uniqueness or their exceptionalism. Both of them have a deep desire for respect. This comes up again and again in people meetings and Russia. America does not respect. Pay attention to this use of the word respect from Xi Jinping, especially. What do you want from America? We want to be respected. We have a hard time understanding what this means, I think, in America. Respect. We're not quite sure what they mean by this. It's a very complicated word, but I would suggest that at a minimum, when they say that, what they mean is that Russia and China both want to have their forms of government accepted as wholly legitimate. We do tend to see Putin's Russia as governance by thugs in America. And Russia knows it. We've got a somewhat different problem with China. And I've spent a lot of time in the past 2 years at the English History Institute thinking about this with a Chinese friend. Most Americans, even those who are deeply committed to working cooperatively with China, I assume most people in this room are, and who work with Chinese government, the city and the county, whatever level it may be, and who love China, who go to China and are dedicated to China in all sorts of ways. If you ask us to be honest about what we really want for China, what most Americans really want for China is a change in values, institutions, and governance, namely for pluralism, openness, transparency, representative government. Most of us want a change in China, a peaceful change, that is so comprehensive and so fast that it amounts to regime change. That's what most of us really think. And they know it. Of course they know it. They're very smart. People are sensitive to parts of the media, right? So they know that we basically don't see the government as legitimate, or we may see it as legitimate up to the point where we think China would be better off. They know this. They're tired of being the bad guy. They want respect. I gotta say, I think they're not going to get it. In this particular department, I don't think American attitudes toward the Russian government, I don't see it, or the Chinese government, or any authoritarian government are going to change. And if I'm right about this, about what Americans really think, then the question is, how could China possibly trust us? Really, knowing that this is sort of our views. They want respect, and this brings Putin and Xi together. There's a strong respect in both countries for strongman government, strong countries. The Putin and Xi friendship, I think, is real. There's been talk of a Xi-Obama friendship short-sleeved summit. They spend a lot of time together. They're tied together. They're good friends. This is not true. It couldn't possibly be, and it's not. With Putin and Xi, there is a real affinity. That's why they went to each other's military parades. That's one of the reasons they're conducting joint military exercises. Also, with Russia and China, we see a considerable degree of economic complementarity. Russia has an enormous number of underdeveloped natural resources that China needs, and they're right across the border, and China has the money to pay for these natural resources. So a high degree of complementarity. And also China and Russia take some similar international positions. Ukraine. China has a really hard time with Ukraine. It's got sacred principles on either side of the Ukraine problem. On the one hand, China is extremely suspicious of it, disapproving of color revolutions, like the one in the Maidan that overthrew a duly elected leader of the Ukraine. China's growth is very offended by it, dislikes that. It worries about color revolution in China. On the other hand, China also believes deeply in non-interference in the other countries' internal affairs and respect for sovereignty. So China cannot approve of the annexation of Crimea or what Russia is doing in the eastern part of Ukraine. You can't approve of that because the claim that Russia can go in and take Crimea because there are a lot of Russians there, or take eastern Ukraine because there are a lot of Russians there. Well, could one of the stands then take over the Xinjiang autonomous region? Because those people are Chinese. So China has sacred principles on both sides, but it's kept very quiet. It's supported Russia in its silence in this case. Both Russia and China feel betrayed by the United States in Libya, where we were told they felt that we cheated them in the UN. We asked them to approve of a resolution that would basically set up safe zones in Libya, and we ended up using that authority. It escalated to kick out Gaddafi with a fairly problematic result, and they feel very cheated by that. They also both blame the United States for the violence in Syria. Both Russia and China, furthermore, are united against the West in advocating on the internet for what they call cyber sovereignty. We advocate for a worldwide democratic internet, which is everywhere open and available to all people. China and Russia say no. This is information, freedom of information is an aspect of sovereignty. And we want international cyber regimes that allow individual nations to find and wall off information and come into their country. So they're united on that in opposition to us.
Yeah.
They're also both very suspicious of international, especially American non-governmental
No, but we ran into each other briefly.
A lot of other NGOs, they tend to think, as does India, interestingly. India has the same kinds of laws. That international NGOs are really a secret fifth column designed to undermine China. And we see this in part by the color revolution when the American NGOs get involved in some of these. So these suspicions are not entirely unfounded. And again, they're unified by views of the decadence and the hegemony of the U.S. So this is the two enormous nations, the two great land powers of Eurasia, to be united in all of these kinds of ways. This is something that we need to pay serious attention to, especially they're both nuclear armed states. Russia remains a military superpower, if not a superpower in any other way. And China is a growing economic and military superpower. It's not yet a political or cultural superpower, but it's growing. So why doesn't Washington take this more seriously? Well, there are some limits to how far Sino-Russian partnership can go. There's a long history of historical mistrust between the two countries, which have a very long border and long experience with each other. In the Treaty of Nerchinsk in 1689 in the Qing Dynasty, China won a huge amount of the Russian Far East and Siberia from Tsarist Russia in a treaty. But then in the Treaty of Argun in 1858, what China calls one of the unequal treaties, Russia took that back. Much of what you now think of as Siberia and the Russian Far East, to a degree also Mongolia, China feels was stolen from it primarily by Russia. I was just in China last week, including I was up in a city called Heilongjiang, which is up on the Russian border. It's actually, I mean a city called Harbin, and Harbin was largely built by Russians, and I was meeting with Chinese who work on Russia in Beijing, but also at think tanks and academies of social sciences up in Harbin. And we found, one, they're not very interested in Russia. America's on their minds in a way that Russia is, the partnership with Russia is important, but it doesn't occupy their minds and their intellectual energy the way the United States does. We also felt a fair amount of disdain for Russia. From Putin is widely admired. Russia as a culture and a country, not so much. That's really not where China looks for its examples. When China wants to compare itself in terms of the real progress it's making, it compares itself to the United States, not to Russia. There's a certain amount of disdain of the Chinese for Russia and Russians. And then in Harbin, in the northeast of China, which is in recession right now, we think of China as this huge economic juggernaut. The old northeastern provinces are in recession. They have a lot of disappointment in Russia because a lot of the trade deals haven't come through. So there are conflicting attitudes. It's also not clear that if you take Putin, who is genuinely admired in China, if you take Putin out of the equation, does China really want to be saddled with Russia over the long term? Is that really, if you ask ordinary Chinese, see, what's your club? Your club is China, North Korea, Cuba, and Russia. Is this really the club that you, young people in Shanghai, young people in Shanghai, want to be in the long term? They say, they're not so sure. So there's discomfort with certain aspects of this relationship. It's also not clear that Russia, again, a very proud civilization state, is going to be able to tolerate being the younger brother in this relationship with China. It's a very unequal relationship because of Chinese money and the disastrous Russian economy. And it's not clear that Russia is actually willing to be sort of the weaker partner in this deal. We also see, you may remember a few years ago, the announcement of enormous natural gas and oil deals. China was going to build and then the oil fields of Siberia and import the build the pipes and then import the natural resources. The price point was never agreed to. It was thought that it was never made public. It's thought that Putin had to agree to a lower price because of sanctions. Those fields haven't been built. None of that's happened. So China has a record in recent years of announcing these big initiatives and announcing big deals, and then they don't happen. So these Russian deals, in fact, haven't happened yet. So how strong is this partnership really? We also see that China's demand for the commodities that Russia can offer is, as its economy slows, that demand is going down. This is very bad news for Russia, as is the low price of oil. There's a fear in Russia, furthermore, of China taking over the Russian Far East. Much of the towns of Siberia and the Far East, the business, the traders, the sellers are Chinese. They're moving north across the border and selling, and there's a worry in Russia about the Sinification, or China turning the Russian Far East to Chinese. Russia also sells arms to some of China's competitors like Vietnam and India, and China has not supported, and Russia has not supported China in the South China Sea, so there's still some tension. Despite these tensions, I think we need to remain very alert to this partnership, especially in the Middle East, where they have common goals and common interests, for example, in working with Iran, possibly, as the most powerful nation in the Middle East. There is some fear of a China, Russia, Iran triangle or entente. I don't want to use Cold War language. All of these countries have multilateral relationships, and yet there's a lot of evidence that they see benefit in making some laws and in leading their areas. So let's come back just in conclusion to this business of defining our relationship with China in terms of our ability to shape the world order, whether it's a partnership with Russia and Iran or with the TPP or whoever it may be. China's rise, China's appearance, I believe, is the single most geopolitical factor in the world today. And we'll read some critics who say that China, that is facing a political dissolution, that parties would fall apart, including Chairman his thesis. And others, major scholars, say that due for an economic crisis, basically not going to stay in the middle of the trap, that it's going to go through a long, slow sort of the dead of the world way that Japan did. I think that those are both dangerous assumptions the United States has made. I think we assume that China continues to rise and change. It continues to rise. Maybe not as fast, but the rise is real. And that China remains an authoritarian state in some form for the foreseeable future. I think those are the best assumptions going forward. So what happens to the world order? Well, one, there is no grand bargain. There's no group, there's no trilateral commission that looks at this definite thing called the world order and renegotiates it. It doesn't work that way. It's a process of the testing of limits. It involves games of chicken. It involves getting away with what you can get away with and forming alliances until you reach a new set of understandings. Reshaping the world order is inherently dangerous and escalatory. We can talk about why if you want. It's also going to require the United States to change. We talk a lot, I think a lot that China's changing. We talk about what we want other countries to do. We very rarely hear Americans talk about whether and how America has to change in the face of everything else going on. There's all this assumption that we're right, we